would like to give a rather slightly improvised talk today, because I think it fits the topic that I want to talk about quite well. My name is Kluitenberg. I'm primarily working as a theorist of media, culture and technology. I have a background in the sciences of the arts, let's say, art history, sociology of the arts, stuff like that. And also taught for a long time in art education. A lot of people in the Netherlands know me because I've for ages worked at the Bali, the Center for Culture and Politics in Amsterdam, organizing new media culture events of various kinds, or from the international circuit. And one of the ideas that I came across in these projects back in approximately 98, 99, when I also had a brief liaison with the Academy of Media Arts in Cologne, was the notion of hybrid space. And this was something that was suggested to me by an architect, and I want to credit him also very explicitly for this concept, because over the years it has been proven that this is an incredibly powerful and useful way of looking at the relationship between space, the notions of space, whether it's physical space in general or the built space or urban space, or this kind of spatial analysis, and the relationship to media and media technologies, evolving media technologies. And also in particular, mobile and wireless technologies that are now dominating, of course, media discourse with smartphones, tablets, and all kinds of other wireless devices, and a plethora of protocols that we interact with daily, including, of course, GPS, which is the most literal way of connecting media to space through coordinates in space. This notion in English is called hybrid space, and years later we made this issue of open hybrid space. And if you get interested in this topic, this issue is available for free as download PDF on the website of SCOR, the Foundation for Art and Public Space, skor.nl, skor.nl. And you can find it there under publications, and it includes contributions by a variety of speakers, artists, architects, theorists, urbanists, sociologists, and also Frans Vogelaar, the architect, and Elisabeth Sicciaridi, with whom he collaborates very closely, and they together now run the Hybrid Space Lab in Berlin. And this term, hybrid space, is actually much more beautifully conveyed in the German description of the professor chair that Frans Vogelaar held at the time, and I think still holds at the Academy of Media Arts in Cologne, which is mediale Raumgestaltung. So this term, mediale Raumgestaltung, you could literally translate as the design of space by means of media. I think it's a wonderful term, and it really gets lost in this translation into hybrid space. But the term itself, hybrid space, is actually very useful. So the main thing that I want to convey, and I will start with just a few, very few theoretical remarks. My entire notes for today are less than 1 page, so nothing to worry about. And then show you a lot of projects that actually embody some of these principles that are captured so convincingly by this concept of hybrid space that Frans Vogelaar and others have been developing. So the main point that I want to make is to juxtapose this notion of hybrid space to the old ideas of the virtual and of virtual reality. And the main message that needs to come out today is that the virtual as a technological condition is something that results from technologies, media technologies that we interact with, just simply does not exist. That this is a completely counterproductive and useless, I would say, notion. Together with this, all the fantasies that have been proposed for so long about virtual reality and complete immersion into virtual environments must be seen, I would argue really strongly, as completely misguided ideas about the development of media technologies. In fact, there is no such thing as virtual reality. Anything that is virtual conveyed via screens is real. The whole juxtaposition of real and virtual, which is even more crude than the juxtaposition of physical and virtual, which you could maybe do something with, but real and virtual is complete nonsense. Because any kind of experience that we have at the screen, whether it's a screen in our houses, television screens, for instance, a cinema screen, the computer screen in your work or office, the screen of the mobile phone, the tablet that you're running around with, all these experiences are just as real as our physical interactions that we have with other people and with objects and things and environments that we move through. So this kind of taking this apart is really doesn't make sense. But we see over the years that it has been a very strong narrative that has been proposed, of course, and we know it most strongly from all kinds of science fiction type and popular culture, and especially cinematic expressions. The most classic of those are Tron. There's, of course, the remake of Tron, visually very beautifully done, where the idea is that somebody is digitized and entirely immersed in a completely virtual, immaterial, disembodied environment, and needs to survive there in a kind of gaming environment. Visually, especially the remake of Tron, is very engaging, I would say. But the underlying idea of this separation of virtual space and physical just doesn't make sense. And it particularly doesn't make sense for the reality, the messy reality that we are immersed in right now. The Lawnmower Man, very popular in cyberculture circles in the 90s, was such another movie that made this point very explicitly of being immersed in these kind of virtual environments, able to change our shape, our identity, our gender, our ethnicity, our race. Everything could be changed in these virtual environments at the flick of a switch or the click of a button, a mouse button maybe. There was this suggestion that in the virtual environment, all kinds of limitations of physical space would be left behind. And the most classic rendition of this exact same idea is, of course, the Matrix trilogy, of which I think the Wachowski brothers are still thinking about creating a fourth version. And they actually based a lot of their ideas on the sociologist Jean Baudrillard, and even asked him, Baudrillard literally, to collaborate with them on one of the movies, which Baudrillard immediately rejected because he especially didn't believe in this separation of physical and media space. You know, he really saw that these are part of the same social reality, and that we actually have to look at how this social reality that we live in, this lived reality, is becoming increasingly complex because of the presence of all these different media forms. So we shouldn't separate them out, but we should understand that these things are so tightly interwoven that they are one and the same thing, which doesn't mean that things don't change. Things do change, but they become more complicated. And in order to understand that, we shouldn't look at them as separated spaces, but rather look at very specifically at what kind of interactions happen in the spaces that we live in that are so deeply saturated with all these technological media. And this is exactly where this notion of hybrid space, as I will explain, and show can become very productive and powerful. Now, if it would be confined to science fiction narratives and cinema, it wouldn't be such a big problem. But also in social theory, we find exactly the same misconception. The most famous one of this is Manuel Castells, the famous, very famous Spanish sociologist, urban sociologist, who teaches in the University of California, I believe, in Santa Barbara, if I'm correct. Castells has been enormously influential, thinking about what internet as a medium would mean for society, how it would influence our work patterns, our social patterns, our economy, employment, all these things. He has written wonderful books about them, which I absolutely would advise anybody to read, especially the founding work which he published in 1996 called The Rise of the Network Society. It's a fantastic book. But in his spatial analysis of space, he makes the same crucial mistake that the Wachowski brothers make in The Matrix and all these other movies make. They produce exactly the wrong image. Castells says we are heading in society in what he calls a structural schizophrenia. So he makes a very strong argument. And remember, this guy is advising governments all over the planet, and they base policies on what he's thinking. So this is not some marginal figure who is just putting out some ideas. This is somebody who has real influence on world politics. And he says there is a structural schizophrenia between two types of spaces that are emerging. The one space is what he calls the space of place. It's an embodied space. It's the space, he says, where the vast majority of the world population has their direct lived experience. So it's very place-bound, it's very physical, it's the local neighborhoods that people live in and that they relate to, which is actually their real reality. And then there is a second space, and this space is the space of transnational information networks, media flows, which he calls the space of flows. And this space of flows, according to him, is placeless. It doesn't have a place, it doesn't have a location, it cannot be localized. But money power, economic power, political power is increasingly moving to this transnational placeless space of flows, Castells said. And it's influencing actually more and more how people live in their local neighborhoods, in their local places, but they have no way of influencing this system. This is basically the image that he's projecting. So there are two separate spaces, and the one is superimposing itself on the other, and it's taking over. Political, economic, social, power, knowledge, information, it's all in this space of flows, in this image of Castells. And it's dominating the embodied lived spaces of the space of place. Now, I find this a very troubling notion because it seems to suggest that the only thing we can do is interact with this space of flows in these information systems which have no location, so who are you going to address? And that there is very little that we can do to intervene in these realities. So we just have to sit back as passive receivers of whatever the gods bestow upon us, descending from the space of flows to the space of place. And it's not true, because this space of flows, these systems of economic dominance, of financial centers and so on, is highly localized. For instance, the work of Saskia Sassen, another sociologist from the United States who teaches at Columbia University, shows very clearly that the financial world is entirely centralized. It's not placeless. It has a very distinct location. It's located in the big financial centers, in Tokyo, in London, in Frankfurt, in New York, and in data centers increasingly, where all these financial transactions take place. It's highly localized. It needs to be also, Sassen says, because only in these urban concentration centers will you find all the skills and expertise and all the power and all the connections between financial, economic, and political actors that make it possible to run this space of flows. So New York is absolutely crucial as a city in this system because the United Nations is there, because it has great universities, because it has these technological capabilities that are unique to the United States, because it has these huge data server farms standing a few miles out of the city, because it has the financial center around Wall Street and all these things. And therefore, it was also no coincidence that it was exactly the icon of this global capitalist system that was attacked by a loose band of Islamist crazy fundamentalists who flew planes into the World Trade Center building. So they understood quite clearly that this is not a placeless space. No, it's highly localized, and it's localized in specific centers. So if it were only this science fiction narrative, we could say, okay, it's nonsense and we can get rid of this. But since it also infected some of the most prominent thinkers in social theory, and therefore, by extension, politicians and policies that were developed for this space, it is problematic. Okay, so this is the context, right? So the virtual as a technological condition doesn't exist. This idea that this media space somehow has no places anymore, that it's everywhere, ubiquitous. Ubiquitous means in Dutch alomtegenwoordig, so omnipresent, it's everywhere, but no longer in a specific place, it's wrong. It's concentrated in specific places, which means that you have very deep and strong concentrations in some spaces and very few and faint presence in other spaces. So we need a much more diversified way of thinking about how does physical space, the lived space, the space that we all inhabit, our neighborhoods, the way that we interact with shops, with people on the street, and so on, how do they relate to the evolving media technological development? And this notion of hybrid space actually is quite powerful in this regard, because you can then switch from this separation image to an image where you have just one space of experience, but this space is becoming increasingly thick. There are more and more layers being imposed on the physical and social spaces that we inhabit. You already have the natural physical space, you impose all kinds of layers by built environments. There are social interactions, economic flows, market flows, and so on. So there's already a lot of layering even before electronic technology emerges. But then we get all kinds of electronic technologies that are superimposed on that. Radio, television signals that are floating around in this space. Then internet comes around. At first, internet was only on computers. It was first even only in the big computing centers of universities, and then it moved to basically the homes of everybody. Internet is a new layer that is imposed on this space. Mobile communications comes in with simple things like GSM and SMS, which have really increased the thickness of this space. And then new protocols come on top, fast wireless protocols. 3G has been introduced in the Netherlands, and right now we're at the moment when 4G connections, fourth generation mobile connections are imposed, which will deliver much, much faster internet access on wireless mobile devices, so that you have really broadband access at some point wherever you go. And this is the ubiquity, the omnipresence, the condition of being everywhere that this theme, ubiquitous art and sound, relates to. Sorry? Can I quickly? Yeah? Okay. So the image that you get is not a separation of two spaces, but actually a kind of sedimentary image, like a geological slice that you make, and you see layers of earth from different periods sort of superimposed upon each other. And this is very much the image of hybrid space that I would like to propose. So What hybrid space does, and I will show that in the examples, is really do away with this very neat and tidy idea of virtual reality. There is no sanitized digital space anymore, but there is a very messy, blurry interaction of physical environments with media flows that operate in this space. Now, importantly, the hybrid aspect of hybrid space is that you have really different spatial logics colliding within the same space. So while we have interactions very directly as physically with other people as we speak and interact, we also interact increasingly through this increased density of media signals with people across space. And it means that several different spatial logics are operating in the same space at the same time. So maybe some people can't remember a time anymore when there weren't mobile phones around, but just making all kinds of agreements where to meet, what place quickly to go to, were pretty much unthinkable without the wireless protocols of GSM. We also know that SMS for a while played an enormously important role in organizing social protest, and in some places it still does. Even today, there are also special protocols that are being developed for that. So coordination in public space is typically something that is dramatically changed as such a new technology is introduced into that space with a new spatial logic. And as this density of this space increases, the thickness of this hybrid space increases. Now, the signals are never the same anywhere across the space. And you can see that in a variety of different ways. Signals are sometimes present. For instance, when I go walk with my dog in the park in the morning, I like to quickly scan the headlines of Volkskrant on my mobile phone. And every now and then, I have a very good signal in the park, and I can easily get to the headlines. And the next moment, the signal is gone again. So it's very variable. This thickness of hybrid space is continuously increasing, decreasing. It's not only from place to place, but it's really even from moment to moment. So it's very discontinuous, and this is very important to emphasize. For instance, when we did, and this is the first project that I want to go to, when we did this project called Reboot, this was with a group of students from the Academy of Media Arts in Cologne, with Frans Vogelaar together back in '99. We took 50 artists on a boat, a big party boat, which could hold up to 1,200 people, took them from Cologne down the Rhine to these different cities. We made all kinds of events, art projects, installations, parties, you name it, during this travel. And we also had radio pirates like the famous DFM International Pirate radio station, one of the last remaining on board during this trip. And we talked with all these telecom companies, and this is '99, so it's quite long ago, right? And we wanted to have a live media signal from this ship, because we had arranged it so that you had a public space, this green one, you had sleeping space in the bottom, and you had a completely equipped media laboratory on the deck that was usually the restaurant in this boat. So it was a floating media laboratory and event space. The project ran for a week. And we wanted to be continuously, among others, on local television in Amsterdam. And there were all kinds of things. This was the webcam view that was constantly streamed, more and more media equipment appearing on the boat. This was the IRC channel that was continuously on. And we talked to British Telecom, to Deutsche Telekom, to Telfort and to countless telecom companies who were promising seamless internet access wherever you go. Now remember, this space is one of the most densely populated zones of Europe. I mean, in this space from Cologne to Amsterdam and Rotterdam, there's maybe 25 million people or so living there together in a more or less integrated urban zone. And still, it was completely impossible to get a decent media signal off this ship all the time. For instance, satellite was impossible because uploading to the satellite couldn't be done from a moving object. They even suggested to us, let's put a little van next to your boat, and then we uplink to the satellite from the van whenever you're in the harbor, and we'll make a fiber optics link to the boat, and these kind of ridiculous ideas. Telfort set a whole team of designers, technical specialists on this. They worked for 2 weeks, and they said after 2 weeks, it can't be done. And even today with 3G, you can't really do this simple thing of making a media studio on a boat and then transmitting from the boat easily. You know, that will really take this 4G connectivity that we're waiting for right together and got some kind of connection that was just enough to send audio off the ship and do this IRC chat. And this is Tuk of DFM International. He starts broadcasting the moment he gets out of bed and continues until he sleeps again. And he was continuously online. For the rest, we just shipped videotapes to a TV studio in Amsterdam. So this is the discontinuity of hybrid space. Another early project that I briefly wanted to show. Is this one. I won't show the whole video, it's short, but I'll just give you a few glimpses. It's a project where we asked artists in Russia and in the Netherlands to come up with projects for the public space in different cities, in Amsterdam, Moscow, and in Ekaterinburg. And these had to be media projects for public space. And one of them was a kind of VJ mix that Leo van Munster, artist from the Netherlands, formerly part of the Depth Collective, developed, where he used these images in the street. And we basically went around with a van and a bus with audience, and a kind of electrical generator and a powerful beamer, and we could create these kind of urban VJ mixes on the spot. It was quite funny to do, rather simple project, but still very effective. We couldn't resist this. This was a 35-meter high video image. We just wanted to have it for once. We didn't do that very long. This is the icon of the Soviet Union, the worker and farmer daughter being used as a projection service. There were different projects realized on this. But what I liked most was the kind of micro-scale interventions. The sound you hear is the generator, basically. And what was really interesting, what Leo was doing, was using almost like home footage and vacation video type of material, projecting it into these public spaces, also into what they call in Moscow the bedroom regions, these kind of residential districts with high houses. And he was showing a lot of summer imagery from the Vondelpark in Amsterdam, also some club girls and some other stuff. And the contrast with this environment, actually these low houses, this is center Moscow. It's just around the corner of the Kremlin. Moscow is pretty low in the middle and high at the edges. Yeah, and here you see even his cat and so on. And it was a very nice way of bringing this kind of very intimate images into public space, and you rarely ever see these kind of intimate images in public space. Now, this is media connected to public space in a very crude and basic way. You can make very complex and advanced interfaces, but what I like is that this really brings this connection out between different elements that fuse together in such an environment very temporarily, and when they're gone, the environment is immediately also, in terms of experience, very different. So we see a completely other way of looking at this relationship than this stupid Hollywood narrative of virtual reality spaces and immersion and the countless theories that have been developed in popular kind of non-fiction books around this time. Yeah. Another nice project is by Edwin van der Heijden. Radioscape. I wasn't even planning to show this, but just very briefly, he hangs these interesting transmitters in space. They transmit sounds. People get this very weird-looking device. I hope, yeah, you can, with a little map on them, and they can navigate the space. In this case, it was hung in the Leidseplein district in different streets. And you could navigate from sound source to sound source, and by turning the receiver that you had in your hands and walking around with this object on street, you were doing two things at the same time, composing your own soundscape, which would be different all the time because all these transmitters were sending sound loops asynchronously, so that you would always get different combinations, and you could go to the source, find it by making it, finding where it gets louder and so on. And at the same time, you make this weird-looking street performance, which also results in a lot of people asking what you're doing with this kind of Geiger counter or whatever device that you have in your hands. It's quite effective. Yeah, sure.
About the previous project, did you have permission to project on the buildings?
No.
And is it prohibited?
Yes.
No.
We discovered, because we did a whole series of projects, and we did like 37 or so events in these 3 cities, and was very different in each city. Now, Moscow is really tough, because Moscow police is really something not to be kidded with. And Moscow is also partly controlled by the KGB, the Kremlin area, so you can't project, unfortunately, on these beautiful walls of the Kremlin, which we would have loved to do. The city government was not willing, even after interventions of the Dutch embassy, to give us permission for anything. So we did everything just on the fly, more or less. But the crucial thing was that there was no sound in these projects. And as soon as you don't put like heavy beats under it or so, nobody really bothers you. So you just drive in, you put up this projector, and you quickly do it. We had another one which worked with text animation. Takes too much time to show it now, by a group called Machine, typographers from Amsterdam. And we projected for half an hour on the Heineken brewery, and nobody bothered us either. But it was very nice, because there was all kinds of interactions with people at night cycling through the area and so on. So it's this kind of really quick and dirty style intervention, but really not a problem in terms of public safety, but also not of police. Quickly, this one, which I like, maybe one of my favorites. It's called Urban Chess. It's been done at a little festival called Psygeo Conflux, which was done in Manhattan, and with a community center and a community radio that was in the air there. And basically, it's people playing chess in this center, and the whole game is being broadcast live on radio, but it's also being relayed. So you see it's on the street that they're playing, and different people can play. Outside this neighborhood, kind of almost squat-like cultural center. They're playing, and these moves are recorded, and they're written down on papers. Yeah. And here you see a detail shot, and as you notice, these ticket notes have mobile phone numbers on them. So what they did, they mapped the chessboard onto the street pattern of Manhattan, which is of course also square, and they asked people to play the pieces of the chess game. And people would have to wear inline skate skillers and dress up as a chess piece according to whatever chess piece they were. And when a move was made, the particular chess piece was called and was asked to move to the next block. So you see them calling their chess pieces, and this is typically what you find in the street. And if two chess pieces would meet each other because the spot was already occupied, then a little battle would emerge on the street. And of course, depending on the status of the piece, you would already know what the outcome of the battle would be. But this way they played this game in urban space. Very funny, small, light project. But the crucial thing about this is, again, only possible through the GSM protocol, totally unthinkable without it. So it sort of fits in this situationist tradition of critique of space and experience of space and estrangement of the experience of space. So it has this, also in the title, Psy refers to psychogeography, this procedure that Guy Debord, the situationist frontman from Paris, developed, walking without purpose through a space to be able to experience it subjectively and become aware of what space actually does to you when you don't have a purpose there. Something that Wim T. Schippers, for instance, in the Netherlands, then also did, these kind of psychogeographic walks through Amsterdam. And they sort of built on this tradition, but they add this layer of GSM, which makes this other spatial logic possible of being able to coordinate all these chess pieces across the neighborhood that this center is located in, and play this urban chess game. So again, you don't even see the media element. Yeah?
Is there a break soon coming?
What?
Is there a break coming?
A break?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not the organizer, so.
A break of 5 minutes.
Okay. How am I doing in time, actually? So how much time do we take still?
You still have 5 more minutes? 10 more?
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, another classic that I want to show is a project by the Institute of Applied Autonomy. Won't say much about it, but it's an inverse surveillance system of a couple of years ago. They basically started a project to track surveillance cameras in public space and then make online maps available how to avoid them. And one interesting one they did also in Amsterdam, which was called Spot the Cam in Amsterdam, together with Bits of Freedom. And this was done because of the royal wedding that took place in Amsterdam, where the entire trajectory of the royal wedding was covered with an enormous number of surveillance cameras. And there were severe concerns about privacy in public space about this. So the authorities said that these cameras would be removed after the wedding. And of course, a few weeks after the wedding on Bijenkorf and other places, the cameras were still moving around and tracking people. So no camera was actually removed. So they decided to do this project also in Amsterdam. The video explains the rest.
Since 1998, the Institute for Applied Autonomy has developed technologies that enable average citizens, political protesters, and the functionally impairment to defend their way of life. Closed-circuit television, or CCTV surveillance of public space, is on the rise, using cameras installed on buildings, ATM machines, and traffic lights. Police officers and private security guards monitor our every move. A 1998 survey documented over 2,400 cameras in New York City's public places. Since then, the number has continued to skyrocket, with more cameras on the way. It has become virtually impossible to avoid CCTV's prying eyes. Until now, using advanced artificial intelligence technology, the Institute for Applied Autonomy has developed privacy, an inverse surveillance system that helps people track and avoid CCTV cameras. Visitors to the IC website are presented with a map of New York City highlighting surveillance camera locations. Predictably enough, the majority are in areas of great financial value, such as Midtown and the financial district, even though street crime is more prevalent in low-income neighborhoods. Users click the map to indicate a current location and a desired destination, and IC's route planning algorithm provides a path of least surveillance, avoiding as many cameras as possible. This map may be printed out for later use. Since its launching in October of 2001, IC has produced well over 1 million unique maps and has been extended to Manhattan, Amsterdam, and Ljubljana. In addition, IC has provoked public debate over CCTV use in such publications as Wired Magazine and the London Financial Times, and on websites including Slashdot and Fox News. IC is also featured on Yahoo's Travel and Transportation Guide to New York City. In August of 2002, the IAA released an updated IC client optimized for mobile and wireless devices. This version allows IC to also function as a data collection tool, enabling groups of users to quickly and easily create and share maps of their city's surveillance infrastructure. IC, now more than ever.
Okay. So they also created a thing called TextMob. I have a video of that, but I won't show it for time reasons, which allows the free distribution of SMS-type messaging to a large group of users if they install the client on their wireless device. And this was used, among others, very effectively in the Orange Revolution in Ukraine a couple of years ago to organize street protests. It was also used quite extensively by the anti-globalization movement, using it in particular to intercept radio communications of police and relaying it to activists on the streets. So again, this kind of technologies show that all these layers that are present simultaneously in physical and public space can be tapped and used for all kinds of purposes, and that it really changes very dramatically the way that we deal with these spaces and the way that we interact in these spaces. One example that I can't show because I don't have a decent, stable wireless internet connection on this project, so I'll just mention it at the close, is a more advanced one by the performance collective Blast Theory from the UK. I tried to put this video in my cache, but somehow couldn't, and they didn't allow download from Vimeo, so can't do anything about it. They created a game. Can You See Me Now a couple of years ago, and now they developed another game which is going further, where somebody who's interacting on the computer screen is playing a chasing game with a real player on the street who is fitted with media equipment and GPS. Through this system, the player on the internet can see where the person in the streets actually is, where he's walking, and at the same time, the player on the streets is also made aware through wireless clients where the player on the internet, the web-enabled player, is playing. So you get a direct game around the GPS coordinates and the wireless carriers that are in the urban space, where the player on the street has to basically complete certain tasks, while the player on the web has to catch this person. And this was developed as an art project in 2004, 2005, executed in a host of different cities across the planet. And interesting thing is that quite quickly after that, GPS games actually became a mainstream thing, where people started to play all kinds of fantasy and chasing games in public space enabled by GPS on their mobile phones mostly. So there is this continuous experimentation in these artist projects that is so close to where the social reality of everyday life is, that these things continuously start to interact and merge together. I have tons of other projects that I can show, but I think the main message comes across that you can really, once you get away from this paralyzing image of the virtual space as something that has no physical properties and that is placeless and all these other things, disregard this man, then you see that there are much more complex configurations, but you can play with them, you can take them apart, you can see what kind of relationships emerge, and you can start to use this as a kind of new material to develop projects around, playful projects, games, art projects that are related to specific spaces, as well as social and political interventions. On that level, I think this notion of hybrid space, because it allows you such a much more diversified way of dealing with the relationship between physical space and media space, is really very useful and powerful, and therefore a much better starting point for anything than this old idea of the real and the virtual, the physical and the virtual, which really doesn't work. So that's what I had to say. Thanks.